Hi, my name is Melvin Way. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is a plant growing series, of which I have many on my YouTube channel. Please subscribe and share my videos. This is a growing series on Yerba Mansa. It's a herb that's found in riparian zones. Riparian zones are stream-fed habitats in Southern California. I wouldn't say they're in abundance, but since the streams are pretty meager here and sometimes seasonal, you get these kind of environments. So it's a very interesting plant. You can see wild specimens here with red foliage and undersides, and the tops are green. So the petioles, those stem structures that connect the leaves and the rest of the plant, are fleshy and very interesting to look at. It has rhizomes that go underground and supposedly are much prettier than ginger rhizomes, but like ginger, they can pop above ground too. It's a very aesthetic plant. You can't miss it. It can grow underwater like rice, as you can see here. These are probably from established root systems or in the dry mountain meadows, as I can show you later on in this video at the very end. So it's a very attractive plant. It has medicinal uses. It's antimicrobial. It's day 30. I have several plant growing experiments going on here that involve Ziploc bags with 5 fistfuls of steam sterilized soil. And after a month sitting on this heat mat in the cold January and February weather, I finally caught a glimpse of green. I was very happy because my other two plant series had gone well underway and started germinating long before that. So here's some footage where it's 54 Celsius. It's blistering hot. I was afraid that my seedlings would have gotten cooked because the water heater broke and the towel got wet, the one that insulated the heat mat and the concrete below. So it's day 38. I still only have the one to transplant that I showed you from 8 days ago, and I'm glad that it appears not to have been cooked by that really high temperature, 54 Celsius. That's probably close to 128, 130 Fahrenheit. So at this point, after you do the transplant, I would suggest gently showering the top layer of soil every 2 days to maintain wetness. It's a plant that really likes hydration in the soil, and it also likes the heat in the sun. So don't be shy with the watering. For most people, overwatering is more common than underwatering. So it's day 40, and we're still looking good after 2 days. And hopefully this thing will start growing and send out leaf primordia, which I think I caught a glimpse of in the middle of the two leaves. It will turn into a third leaf and a fourth leaf and lead to a very nice plant growing series. So just keep doing that every 2 days. It's day 46. A third leaf appeared 8 days after the transplant, and I can see the little leaf primordia for a fourth leaf. So that means everything survived. Everything is good and well with that one plant, but I would like to have more backups. I typically don't like to start and have a plant series go underway with just one plant. So I'm scanning this zipper bag for any additional seedlings, and there's nothing. And here's original packaging from Bountiful Gardens. It's got the information. You can go back and pause if you want to read that. Yeah, no kidding about the germination being slow. It's very, very slow. My annual plant, Sweet Annie, grows a lot faster, and California goldenrod took off at some point, even though took off is kind of strong. It's pretty slow. So the seeds are tiny but visible, unlike the other two species that I just mentioned, where you can hardly see the seeds. These are very easy to see, even though they're tiny. They're like little peppers. But they're sort of a ovular oblong shape, not completely spherical, very easy to manipulate. So I planted all of these. In the original Ziploc bag, I probably put in 2/3 of the seeds. So I'm just going to do this and get the rest of the 10 or a dozen so seeds that you just saw in there. And the soil in there looks dry because I found out that zipper bags, no matter what brand you buy, aren't airtight. The potting mix will dry out, so you have to water. And in the beginning, for most of my plant series this year, I just used distilled water so I won't salt up the soil, although that hardly matters for just what you're going to put in the bag there. So I'm mixing it manually and hoping that if I put it back on the heat mat, more seeds will germinate. So it's day 58, a fourth leaf is out. Still looks pretty pathetic at this point. You know, these things grow at a glacial pace. The third and fourth leaves have acquired a more round appearance. And at one point, it was just too hot to use a heat mat in the afternoon sun. You could see with the sun striking, it's 52 Celsius. That's 124 Fahrenheit. So it's late March. I don't need this heat mat anymore, although just, you know, maybe a week or two ago it was too cold still. And a few hours later, everything cooled by 18 Celsius. So you can see it's 33 degrees Celsius in the afternoon sun. That's lower than body temperature. That's okay. And we're going to examine this bag to see if there's anything in there worth transplanting. Yeah, I see 2 new seedlings. So that's great news. The watering helped. So that's what it needed. It had plenty of heat, believe me, and I'm surprised that all the seeds were still viable even after those periods of 50 Celsius. Probably not as hot as the inside of a car with the windows rolled up, but still very, very hot nonetheless. So I'm going to do a transplant for both of these. I'll plant them on the left and right positions relative to the center. You know, this is a self-watering pot. It doesn't really look like it because I haven't shown you the bottom, but it's got a watering tray opening at the bottom, which always faces me, the edge of the table. So that's how I keep my orientation. But these seedlings are just so tiny, and it's a lot of delicate work to do this. So people with, big meaty fingers will probably just crush them or rip up the roots, and then you're done, So it's not an easy process, but I think they grow way faster outside of that bag than they do inside it. So as slow as these things grow, I just have to do this. Otherwise, they'll, we're just never going to get this plant growing series underway. It's already going way slower than everything else I have. So it's day 65. The seedlings are developing faster. At least that's my feeling. I was so excited to get this started that, I just want to take everything out of the bag in the beginning. But then I thought, maybe I should leave them in there and not disturb them so they could develop a little bit more, since it's much easier to transplant seedlings that are bigger. But I don't think they were really going anywhere. Likewise for my Sweet Annie and other seedlings in the Ziploc bags, they just weren't going very fast in the bags. So I've got 2 more seedlings, and I'm going to transplant them in the top and bottom positions. So the seed coats are very easy to remove. You don't have to do anything physically aside from maybe use a squirt bottle or directly shower some water on top of them. And sometimes the seed coats will come off right before your eyes. Other times you might need to do that and just kind of gently pick it off with your fingernail. So transplant soil carried some seeds that germinated. Here's an example. As you can see below, the leaves haven't fully opened yet. And with enough watering on the surface, eventually I expect to get more. It's day 79. The potting mix surface is mossy from all the watering. The central plant is finally big enough to be visible from indoors, from my sliding door, because I would keep peeking out to see if I could see the central plant, especially in the early days after the transplant, and I couldn't even see it. It was just camouflaged among all the potting mix particles, even before the moss that resulted in all this green. So I've got several seedlings now. If I had to do this all over again, I would sow seeds directly in this pot like I showed you earlier in the early mid part of this video, and just keep watering from the top every 2 days to keep it all soaking wet. I think the bag was definitely the right approach maybe in winter for some of the other species, but for this, considering what you just saw with the transplanting, it's kind of difficult to do. So I would say just directly sowing seeds in there is fine. I have to use a watering bottle squirt bottle to get rid of the dirt particles, because either I planted those too low, or they're just naturally curving down the leaves. So the green of the tiny leaves is more visible. It's easier to capture on my camera in cloudy skies versus full sun. When you have really tiny things and you try to get up close with your camera, it just looks kind of yellowish. It's just all glare and light reflecting off the leaves. So the central plant looks bigger now. It has leaves that I wouldn't say are spade shaped, but they are looking healthier, fleshier. It's not exactly a succulent, but it does have the characteristics, the fleshiness of many succulents I've seen. So it looks quite different from what you'll see in the wild. These are all mature plants, of course, raised in a natural environment. So this is taken from 2017, May 2nd. You can see bugs ate holes in lots of these, so it does have natural predators. And humans can eat these leaves too as well. In fact, I look forward to eating some foliage when my plants get more robust and churn out leaves at a fast rate. So you got your first flower of the year there in mid-spring, and you can see these runners. This one looks kind of dried out. You can see a node there with a leaf sticking out, but I think that just got chewed off or broken off by humans walking around. And when the leaves, the runners, are pink or reddish like that, it's very attractive. It's a curiosity in the chaparral environment of Southern California. And the foliage looks very attractive as well. It looks like an elongated spinach just growing in a place that's very dry usually. So it's very interesting. It doesn't look like your typical weed with all these compound ornate leaves and lots of fuzziness or spikes and things like that to deter predation. It just looks like a very inviting plant, and it has all these curious runners that are fleshy and red running out, and they're not bolted to the ground or anything. As far as I could tell, I could just lift any of these up and I didn't see any roots extending down. Now maybe that will change later on in the season if it finds a suitable spot. Maybe it can just keep cloning itself vegetatively, asexually, without any sexual reproduction, which I think is the mode of reproduction actually for most of these plants. In my opinion, typically for very, very successful plants, especially in dry climes, deserts and chaparral and such, it seems like they could just reproduce by cloning themselves over and over again. No need for additional genetic diversity because, in the case of cholla cacti, for example, it's so successful. It doesn't seem to need to generate a lot of viable fruits and seeds. And in some cases, some plants don't have viable seeds, although I grew these from seeds, the ones that I'm showing you in this growing series, but I've also read different accounts that say the seeds are typically not viable. There's a lot of information on Yerba Mansa. It's very interesting to read. As far as I know, this plant is mostly antimicrobial in its medicinal use. It's good against the common cold and other diseases to which there are still no cures for provided by modern science. But that sounds a little bit too good to be true, I know, but there's also other articles and sources where it can have more miraculous uses, such as curing cervical cancer. So it's day 94, and every time I do this, I shower the soil. The leaves just kind of touch the soil. Maybe it's because I planted everything too high, but I don't like that because I don't like leaves being wet and touching the soil. It generally leads to rot. And I don't know how well you can see here, but it seems like maybe the 2 or 3 leaves that are lower lying with areas that touch the soil there in the central plant, they're sort of suffering from some kind of rot maybe. They've got these dead brown spots. That's definitely not supposed to be. Maybe it's just because I water too much. Who knows? That plant looks a little different. I'm wondering if it's a California goldenrod that just hitched a ride into this pot. Sometimes I put on gloves and maybe I use the same gloves for different pots to do all these transplants and whatnot. So maybe a seed fell in there, but it could just be sometimes random variants. Some of the leaves look different, even among the same species, depending on the conditions or just genetically. There's some variance. So I wouldn't rule it out yet. But I've got several healthy seedlings here. I originally was just banking on the prospect of having just that one to go through the entire series with. I'm sure it would have succeeded, but it's better to have backups. So this is footage from 2016, March 19th. And this is about 1 kilometer in elevation, probably 3,000 feet and above. It's a little higher here. That was just the start of the trail. So there's no apparent water sources on these hilltops, which are 100 feet, several hundred feet in some cases above the streams that might run through the hills. Yet in these mountain meadows and cow pastures where it gets really hot and dry during the summer, I still see many Yerba Mansa plants just growing freely. So it's a very drought tolerant and resistant plant that can grow in a wide variety of climates. Please stay tuned to my YouTube channel for further updates on Yerba Mansa growing and other plant series as well. Thanks for watching.